Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jonathan. I'm a flight controls and hydromechanical systems specialist here in EASA. I have two subjects which I would like to talk to you about this afternoon. The first being the external doors for the VTOL aircraft, and the second, the landing gear systems. So to begin with the external doors, and we start with an important assumption. As per Rotorcraft products today, we assume that there is an unpressurized cabin. For anyone who happens to be familiar with the Part 25 regulations for pressurized aircraft, you will know that the external doors regulations are, for very good reasons, quite complex. But we don't apply those to this sort of vehicle. Within this presentation, I will cover the retention of the doors closed. Another important function of external doors is to permit the emergency egress of the aircraft, but that will not be covered in this presentation. Generally, we assume that a crew or passenger door being open in flight is an unsafe condition, and we do not accept passenger retention devices, for example a seatbelt, as mitigation against this. Thus, we will expect there to be a means to retain the door closed in flight and to indicate its status. I've mentioned passenger and crew doors, but in fact we apply these means of compliance to any external opening on the vehicle. Say, for example, a baggage door or a service port for systems access. As I have said previously, these means of compliance pertain to the door latching and the indication of that door, and I am not going to cover structures aspects or emergency egress within these means of compliance. Service experience on other vehicles has shown that particular risk aspects, for example, but not limited to, bird strike, is important for the door retention and indication, and these therefore form part of the means of compliance. So the MOC VTOL for the doors will provide some definitions and a recognition of parts of the relevant ASTM standard, and then on top of that ASTM standard will be reference to other specificities of the door design. So the MOC is linked to this higher level VTOL requirement 2250 subparagraph E. I have mentioned some of these points before, but these are the typical topics covered within the MOC VTOL for doors. As I've said, it's important to define what is or isn't a door for the purposes of this guidance. We consider latching to prevent either inadvertent or deliberate opening in flight where this could be unsafe. We want awareness of the status of the doors, both for the passengers themselves, the flight crew and the ground crew. This being on or next to the door itself, but also on the flight crew display. And as I've mentioned before, particular risk aspects are also covered. This now concludes the first part of my presentation about the doors. So let's now move to the landing gear systems. Again, we start with an important assumption in that the vast majority of takeoffs and landings will be vertical, with allowing some possibility for a running landing in the emergency case. And the braking requirements are commensurate to a vertical landing, not a horizontal landing. That is quite an important difference. So far, we have assumed that there is a reasonably conventional wheel, tyre and brake. So other sorts of landing gear design are out of scope at the moment and will probably need to be covered on a case-by-case basis via a CRE. I am not going to address ground resonance within this MOC standard. That will be covered at the aircraft level. I've assumed, commensurate with the vertical takeoff and landing, that any ground steering function is limited to low speed. And again, commensurate with a vertical takeoff and landing, we assume that there is no significant longitudinal thrust whilst the aircraft is on ground. I'm not going to read these line by line, but these are the subsystems and aspects which are covered within the MOC for the landing gear. So quite similar to what I was saying a few minutes ago for the doors, the MOC VTOL will include the scope and definitions, what is in and out of scope. There is the possibility of a link to the ASTM, but in reality, that ASTM standard is written around a running takeoff and landing for a conventional fixed-wing aircraft. And as I've already said, we're assuming vertical takeoff and landing. So whilst there is some link to the ASTM, it is in places quite tenuous. Hence there is indeed, and there must be, additional guidance material for the specificities of a VTOL vehicle. So I have put up in the slide pack the special conditions standard itself to which this advisory material pertains to. On the next two slides, I am going to take you through some of the aspects within this MOC material. As I've said before, definitions and exemptions, i.e. defining the scope of the material, is important. We will cover an absence of interaction between the steering function and the extension retraction function for a retractable landing gear in order to prevent possible interaction between the landing gear and the airframe. Towing, if towing is possible, must be in a way that prevents damage to the landing gear or ensures that this damage is detectable. The MOC material will cover the qualification of wheels and brakes, including approval of the wheel design. It covers as well brake stopping capability, as I said before, with the assumption that most landings will be vertical. We look at the park brake capability, including the allowance for emergency egress on ground and the unbalanced forces, bearing in mind that the vehicle might not be on a level surface. Indication of the status of brake wear is considered important. We expect that the landing gear systems will have and demonstrate capability with the rest of the airframe, although, as previously mentioned, the subject of ground resonance is not in scope of this part of the MOC. We expect clear indication to the flight crew of the landing gear status, and that includes a warning if the landing gear is not extended before landing. And in the case of a retractable landing gear that is not manually powered, we expect a means of emergency extension. So that concludes what I wanted to say today about the landing gear and the doors. The next stage will be to release the material for public consultation, then go through the normal comment review document process to address the comments received, and then obviously the final stage is to publish the MOC material. That's the end of my presentation. I would like to thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to welcoming you in Cologne in person for next year's symposium. Thank you.